Today we're making a mini stuffed pumpkin. For the main part, I will be using 24/7 cotton yarn in amber, which is a number 4 or medium weight mercerized cotton yarn. For the stem, I'll use the same brand in the color Cafe. For my hook, I'm using a 4mm Clover Moor hook, and you'll also need a yarn needle, scissors, and some stuffing. First, we'll start with our orange yarn, and we'll do a slip knot. To make a slip knot, place the yarn over the palm of your hand with the tail end at the bottom. Hold the yarn with your thumb, then wrap the top around 2 fingers to form an X. And I like to hold it with my pinky. Then insert your hook under one side of the X, then over and grab the other side and pull it through. Remove your fingers and tighten the knot. Then we'll chain 15. To chain, yarn over and pull through the loop on your hook. And each chain is a little sideways V. Again, we'll yarn over and pull through, and we're going to continue chaining until we have 15 chains. Here are my 15 chains, and we're going to do a slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. So here's the first chain, and here is the second chain from the hook. To do a slip stitch, insert your hook into that second chain through the middle of that V and going under the top loop, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on your hook. Now we'll move on to the next chain and do another slip stitch. Again, insert your hook through the V and under just the top loop, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on your hook. Next, we'll do 10 half double crochets. To do a half double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through. Now you should have 3 loops on your hook, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Again, to do a half double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And we'll do that 8 more times until we have a total of 10 half double crochets. Once we finish our 10 half double crochets, we'll do another 2 slip stitches. And we should have done 2 slip stitches, 10 half double crochets, and then 2 slip stitches. And this is how it should look. It should be a little thinner at the ends where the slip stitches are. Now we'll start the next row. To start a new row, we will chain 1, then turn. And we're going to repeat the last row, but in the back loops only. And this V is the chain we just made, and this next one is our first stitch. So to do our first slip stitch in the back loop only, insert your hook through the middle of the V of the first stitch and out the back, grabbing the back loop only. Yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on your hook. And for the next slip stitch, insert your hook through the middle of the V and out the back, grabbing the back loop only, and complete your slip stitch. And now we'll do 10 half double crochets in the back loops only. And then 2 more slip stitches at the end. So here are our first 2 rows, and this is how every 2 rows will look like. They'll form a peak in between them. And we'll start the next row by chaining 1 and turning. And we'll just continue that row, 2 slip stitches, 10 half double crochets, and 2 slip stitches in the back loops only. And to start every new row, we'll chain 1 and turn. And we're going to do that row for a total of 24 rows. Here I have my 24 rows, and now we'll connect the 2 ends together. So we'll chain 1 and turn like we've been doing. Then we'll pull the bottom end forward and up to slip stitch them together. First, we'll insert our hook into the front loop of the first stitch. So we'll insert our hook in from the side and out the middle of the V, grabbing only the front loop. Then make sure to put your working yarn to the right side. Then we'll insert our hook over and into the first chain on the other end. It's not this loop here, but the one to the left of it. Then we'll yarn over, pull through both ends, then pull through the loop on our hook. Then we'll move on to the next stitch and go in from the side and out the middle of the V and into the next chain on the other end. Yarn over and pull through both ends and through the loop on your hook. And we're going to do this all the way across, and everything should line up perfectly. Once we finish, we're going to chain 1 and cut our yarn a few inches, enough to close this bottom end of the pumpkin. Then we'll pull on the hook and tighten our knot. Now we're going to make the stem with our brown yarn. First, we'll make a magic ring, which is basically a slip knot that you don't tighten. So again, we'll place the yarn over the palm of our hand with the tail end at the bottom. Hold the yarn down with your thumb, then wrap the top around 2 fingers to form an X and hold it with your pinky. Insert your hook under one side of the X, then over and grab the other side and pull it through. Then use your right hand to hold the yarn and the hook. Remove your fingers, and here is your magic ring. And you can pull on the working yarn to tighten the ring so it's easier to work with. Now we're going to chain 1 and put 6 single crochets into the ring. To do a single crochet, insert your hook into the ring, yarn over, pull through. Now you should have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through the 2 loops. Again, insert your hook into the ring, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through the 2 loops on your hook. And we'll do 4 more single crochets for a total of 6 single crochets. Once we have 6 single crochets, we're going to pull on this tail end to close the ring. Then we'll slip stitch to the first single crochet we did in this round. So here is our first, and we'll go under the 2 loops that form the V on top of the stitch. And do a slip stitch. Then we'll chain 1 and start the next round. For the second round, we'll do our first single crochet into the first stitch, which is the same stitch that we did our slip stitch into. So go under that same V and complete your single crochet. Then we'll complete our 6 single crochets all the way around, so 1 single crochet into each stitch. And for the stem, remember that we're going under both loops of the V for each stitch. And once we're done, we'll do a slip stitch to our first stitch of the round again, which is this one here. Then we'll chain one and do 6 single crochets again for the third round. Finally, we'll slip stitch one last time, chain one, and cut our yarn a few inches, enough to sew the stem to the top of the pumpkin. Then we'll pull on our hook and tighten the knot. And we can stuff our first tail end into the stem to hide it. And we'll use the other one for sewing. Now we're going to sew the stem to the pumpkin, and one side of the pumpkin should have 2 loose ends and the other should have none. We'll sew the stem to the side without any loose ends. So we'll grab our yarn needle and thread our tail end into it. Then we'll insert our needle under the stitch next to the tail end, and we'll go under the V from the inside of the stem to the outside. Then we'll thread our needle through 2 peaks like this. And it's to gather these 4 rows between my thumbs together. And we'll pull the yarn through and make sure to keep tension as we sew. Then we'll move on to the next stitch over on the stem, again going from the inside to the outside. Then go through the next 2 peaks on the pumpkin. And we'll do that 4 more times until the entire stem is sewn onto the pumpkin. And once we're done, we'll thread the yarn down into the center of the pumpkin. And we'll look at it from the inside, and we're going to make a knot with our tail end. So with my needle, I'll make a loop on the surface. Then pull the yarn through the loop with my hook to make a knot. And our stem should be securely sewn onto our pumpkin. And at this point, we can fill the pumpkin with stuffing. And now we can sew the bottom of the pumpkin closed with the yarn tail we left earlier. So we'll thread the yarn through the needle and gather the peaks together like this. And there should be 12 of these peaks. When we finish, we can pull on the yarn to close the hole. And there should be another loose end here that we can double knot it with. Now we can pull the loose ends into the pumpkin to hide them. And I like to use a smaller crochet hook to do this. Finally, we can shape the pumpkin to whichever shape we want. And here are my finished pumpkins. That's all for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, leave any questions you have in the comments if anything was unclear. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.